A Christmas party in Boston in 1907 seemed cheerful until the reflection in the window startled experts. Have you ever looked at an old photograph and felt a chill run down your spine? Today, I'm going to share with you a story about a Christmas party photograph from 1907 that left even the most skeptical experts speechless. What started as a joyful celebration in Boston's elite society turned into one of the most puzzling mysteries in photographic history. Before we begin, if you enjoy this type of content, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Oh, and speaking of growing channels, I'm also developing another channel focused on historical mysteries from around the world. You'll find the link in the description below if you're interested in even more intriguing stories like this one. The morning of December 3rd, 2019, started like any other at the Whitmore Estate auction house in Boston. Sarah Chen, a young photography authenticator with jet black hair pulled into a tight bun, carefully unwrapped another bundle of early 20th century photographs. The estate sale of the Ashford family had yielded dozens of boxes filled with memories frozen in silver and gelatin. Another Christmas party, she muttered to herself, examining a particularly well-preserved photograph through her magnifying glass. The image showed a lavish parlor decorated with garlands, a towering Christmas tree adorned with candles and glass ornaments, and about 20 people dressed in their finest evening wear. The photograph's quality was exceptional for 1907. The exposure was perfect, the composition deliberate, and the details crisp. Sarah was about to catalogue it as just another society photograph when something caught her eye. In the large window behind the revelers, there was a reflection. Not unusual in itself. Windows often captured reflections in old photographs, but this reflection showed something that made her hand freeze mid-notation. The reflection showed the same room, the same party, but with one crucial difference. There was an additional figure standing among the guests, a woman in a dark dress who wasn't visible in the actual photograph. "That's impossible," Sarah whispered, adjusting her magnifying glass. She counted the people in the room, 23. Then she counted the people in the reflection, 24. Her colleague, Marcus Webb, an older gentleman with wire-rimmed spectacles and 30 years of experience in historical photography, noticed her prolonged silence. "Find something interesting, Chen?" Sarah wordlessly handed him the photograph and her magnifying glass. Marcus examined it for a full minute before slowly lowering the glass. "In all my years, I've never seen anything quite like this." The photograph's reverse bore an inscription in faded brown ink. "Christmas Eve celebration, Ashford residence, Beacon Hill, December 24th, 1907. May we never forget those who cannot be with us." By noon, word of the unusual photograph had spread through the auction house. Eleanor Whitmore, the establishment's owner and a respected figure in Boston's antiquities community, called for a formal authentication process. "We need to be absolutely certain this isn't some elaborate hoax," she declared, her silver hair gleaming under the examination room's bright lights. The initial tests were promising. The paper stock was consistent with the Eastman Kodak Company's 1907 product line. The silver gelatin emulsion showed the expected aging patterns. The photographer's stamp on the corner, J. Morrison Studios, Boston, matched known examples from the period, but the reflection remained inexplicable. Dr. Raymond Holt from MIT's Department of Materials Science and Engineering was brought in to conduct more sophisticated analyses. Using non-invasive imaging techniques, he confirmed that the photograph had not been manipulated. The emulsion layer was intact and showed no signs of double exposure or post-production alteration. From a technical standpoint, Dr. Holt explained to the growing group of interested parties, this is a single exposure taken in 1907. Whatever we're seeing in that reflection was captured at the moment the photograph was taken. If you're enjoying this mystery so far, remember to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me bring you more fascinating stories like this one. Sarah spent the rest of the day researching the Ashford family. William Ashford had been a prominent banker, his wife Margaret, a noted philanthropist. They had hosted elaborate Christmas parties every year from 1895 until William's death in 1923. The family's descendants had maintained the Beacon Hill mansion until 2018, when the last direct heir passed away without children. As evening fell and the auction house prepared to close, Sarah made one more discovery that sent shivers down her spine. In the estate's inventory, she found a list of attendees for the 1907 Christmas party. There were 23 names, exactly matching the number of people visible in the photograph. But at the bottom of the list, in different handwriting, someone had added a 24th name, Elizabeth Morrison, in spirit if not in flesh. Elizabeth Morrison, the same surname as the photography studio. Sarah photographed the guest list and the original image with her phone, knowing she would spend her evening diving deep into Boston's historical records. As she locked the photograph in the auction house's vault, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled upon something far more complex than a simple photographic anomaly. The winter wind howled outside the auction house as Sarah bundled up in her coat. The streets of Boston were decorated for Christmas, just as they had been 112 years ago when that photograph was taken. But now, the cheerful lights seemed to cast longer shadows, and every reflection in the shop windows made her pause and look twice. What had really happened at that Christmas party in 1907? And who was Elizabeth Morrison? The Boston Public Library's research room hummed with the quiet intensity of focused scholars. Sarah had arrived early, claiming a corner table near the historical archives section. Spread before her were genealogical records, newspaper clippings, and city directories from the early 1900s. Marcus joined her around 10, bringing coffee and his own collection of photography trade publications from the era. "Found anything about our mysterious Elizabeth?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. Sarah pushed a death certificate across the table. Elizabeth Morrison died December 20th, 1907, 4 days before the Christmas party. She pointed to the cause of death line: complications from pneumonia. Marcus studied the document. She was young, only 28. He cross-referenced with his photography journals. And look here, James Morrison, proprietor of J. Morrison Studios. They were married in 1903. The pieces were beginning to form a pattern. James Morrison had been one of Boston's most sought-after society photographers. His studio on Tremont Street had captured the city's elite for over a decade. Elizabeth had been his assistant, and after their marriage, his creative partner. According to this, Sarah indicated a society column from the Boston Globe. Elizabeth Morrison was close friends with Margaret Ashford. They served together on the Boston Ladies Charitable Society. The newspaper archives painted a picture of two women who had been nearly inseparable. Shopping expeditions to Jordan Marsh, afternoon teas at the Parker House, charity galas at the Boston Symphony Hall. In photograph after photograph, ironically many taken by James Morrison himself, Elizabeth and Margaret appeared together, always smiling, always elegantly dressed. Then, in December 1907, the mentions of Elizabeth stopped abruptly. Dr. Patricia Lawson from Harvard's History Department had agreed to meet them that afternoon. A specialist in early 20th century Boston society, she provided context that the documents couldn't capture. "You have to understand, Doctor," Lawson explained, gesturing with her coffee cup. "Death was viewed very differently in 1907. The Victorian obsession with mourning and remembrance was still very much alive. It wasn't uncommon for the bereaved to include symbolic representations of the deceased in important gatherings. But a reflection, Marcus pressed. How would that even be possible? Dr. Lawson smiled mysteriously. James Morrison was known for his innovative techniques. He experimented with long exposures, special lenses, and unconventional developing processes. Some of his work bordered on the artistic rather than purely documentary. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Eleanor at the auction house. They had found more photographs from the Ashford estate, including several taken at previous Christmas parties. Sarah and Marcus excused themselves and hurried back to examine the new discoveries. Leave a comment below about what you think really happened at that Christmas party. The additional photographs spanned from 1901 to 1906. Each showed the same parlor, similarly decorated, with many recurring faces among the guests. Elizabeth Morrison appeared in all of them, always standing near Margaret Ashford. Her presence was vibrant, full of life, a stark contrast to the shadowy figure in the window reflection. Look at this. Marcus pointed to a detail in the 1906 photograph. Elizabeth was wearing a distinctive brooch, a silver butterfly with sapphire wings. Now look at the reflection in the 1907 photo. Sarah magnified the image on the high-resolution scanner. The figure in the reflection was wearing the same brooch. Eleanor had managed to contact a descendant of the Morrison family, James and Elizabeth's great-great-niece living in Cambridge. Linda Morrison Hayes agreed to meet them the next day and might have family records that could shed light on the mystery. That evening, Sarah visited the location of the original Morrison studios. The building now housed a modern coffee shop, but the proprietor mentioned that the basement still contained some original fixtures from its previous incarnations. With permission, Sarah descended into the musty space. Among the debris and forgotten furniture, she found an old storage cabinet built into the wall. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a collection of glass photographic plates. Most were damaged beyond recognition, but one intact plate caught her attention. It was a test shot of the Ashford parlor, taken from the exact angle as the Christmas party photograph. But this plate showed something extraordinary. Multiple exposures layered on top of each other, creating a ghostly effect where figures seemed to exist in multiple places simultaneously. On the plate's edge, in James Morrison's handwriting, Experimental Technique Number 7, Memory Capture Process, December 1907. Sarah carefully transported the plate back to the auction house. Under proper examination lights, more details emerged. The technique seemed to involve reflecting existing light patterns in a way that could capture what Morrison had cryptically labeled persistent visual echoes. He was trying to photograph memories, Sarah breathed, understanding beginning to dawn. Not ghosts. Memories. Impressions left behind by repeated presence in a space. Marcus remained skeptical. That's poetic, but photographically impossible. Light doesn't work that way. Not with normal techniques, Sarah countered. But what if Morrison discovered something? Some quirk of optics and chemistry that could capture more than just the present moment? As they prepared to leave for the night, Sarah noticed something else about the test plate. In the corner, barely visible, was a figure that looked remarkably like Elizabeth Morrison. But unlike the clear image in the Christmas party reflection, this figure was fractured, appearing in multiple places simultaneously, as if she existed in several moments at once. Whatever James Morrison had been attempting in his studio, he had brought it to the Ashford Christmas party just days after his wife's death. Whether through grief, genius, or sheer accident, he had created a photograph that captured something that shouldn't have been possible. The presence of someone who was no longer there, yet somehow still remained. Linda Morrison Hayes lived in a Victorian-era house in Cambridge that seemed frozen in time. Persian rugs covered polished hardwood floors, and family photographs dating back over a century decorated every surface. She greeted Sarah and Marcus with the kind of formal politeness that spoke of old Boston breeding. "I've been expecting someone to ask about the Christmas photograph eventually," Linda said, pouring tea from a silver service. "My family has whispered about it for generations." She led them to a study lined with leather-bound journals and photograph albums. From a locked drawer, she produced a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. "These are the letters James wrote to his sister in the months following Elizabeth's death. He never sent them." Sarah carefully unfolded the first letter, dated December 25th, 1907. Dearest Catherine, last night I achieved what many would consider impossible, and what I myself can scarcely believe. Elizabeth attended the Ashford Christmas party, just as she had promised Margaret she would. That I was the only one who could see her matters not. She was there, captured forever in silver and light. The letters revealed a man consumed by grief and obsessed with the boundaries between presence and absence. James Morrison had spent the days following his wife's death experimenting frantically in his studio, convinced that the camera could capture more than the human eye could see. He believed, Linda explained, that repeated presence in a location created what he called luminous impressions, patterns of light that persisted beyond the physical presence of a person. Elizabeth had been to so many gatherings in that parlor. He thought he could capture her impression. Marcus examined one of James's technical drawings. This is actually quite sophisticated for 1907. He was using principles of light interference that wouldn't be formally understood for decades. The letters grew increasingly frantic as Christmas Eve approached. James wrote of Margaret Ashford's deep grief over Elizabeth's death, how she had begged him to find a way to include her dear friend in the celebration. Whether Margaret believed in James's experiments or was simply humoring a grieving widower remained unclear. If you're still enjoying this mystery, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next video. Linda showed them another photograph, this one of James Morrison himself, taken in 1908. The man in the image looked haggard, aged far beyond his 32 years. He never recovered from that night, Linda said softly. He closed the studio 3 months later and moved to California. He never took another photograph. Sarah studied the unsent letters more carefully. In one dated December 23rd, James had written, "I have discovered that certain atmospheric conditions enhance the phenomenon. The glass of the window acts as more than a mere reflective surface. It becomes a lens through time itself. When the light is just right, when the emotions of those present reach a certain intensity, the boundary thins. Tomorrow night, with everyone thinking of Elizabeth, missing her presence at Margaret's side, tomorrow night I will prove that love transcends death." But here's what's truly strange, Linda continued, opening another album. Other photographers tried to recreate James's technique. None succeeded. Whatever he did that night was never replicated. She showed them letters from photographers across the country who had heard rumors of the Morrison Christmas photograph. Some dismissed it as trickery, others begged for the secret. James never responded to any of them. Dr. Lawson from Harvard had connected Sarah with a physicist who specialized in historical photographic techniques. Dr. Alan Chen, no relation to Sarah, examined the technical drawings and James Morrison's notes with growing excitement. "This is remarkable," he said, running calculations on his tablet. Morrison was essentially describing quantum entanglement principles applied to photons. He couldn't have known the science, but through trial and error, he might have stumbled onto something real. "Are you saying the photograph is genuinely supernatural?" Marcus asked skeptically. "Not supernatural," Dr. Chen corrected, "but possibly capturing a phenomenon we don't fully understand. The combination of specific atmospheric conditions, the optical properties of the glass, the silver halide crystals in the emulsion, and yes, even the emotional state of the observers. Under exactly the right circumstances, it's theoretically possible to capture light patterns from a different temporal state." Sarah felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. "So, Elizabeth was really there. Define there," Dr. Chen smiled. "Was her consciousness present? Almost certainly not. But could an impression of her presence, created by repeated interactions in that space, have been captured under unique conditions? The mathematics suggest it's not impossible." Linda led them back to the sitting room and revealed one final piece of the puzzle. "There's something else. After James died in 1943, his belongings were sent back to Boston. Among them was a sealed envelope marked to be opened only if the Christmas photograph surfaces. She handed Sarah the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with James Morrison's shaky handwriting. To whomever finds the photograph, know that what you see is truth, not trickery. Elizabeth kept her promise to Margaret. She attended one final Christmas party. That others could not see her matters not. The camera sees what the heart knows to be true. Some will seek scientific explanations, others will cry fraud. Both are wrong. Love creates its own reality, and for one perfect moment that reality was captured in silver and light. Do not attempt to recreate what was done. It required a price I would not wish upon anyone. James Morrison, 1943. The room fell silent. Outside, clouds passed over the sun, casting moving shadows through the windows. For just a moment, Sarah could swear she saw something shift in the glass, a figure in a dark dress with a butterfly brooch. But when she blinked, there was only her own reflection staring back. The Ashford mansion on Beacon Hill stood like a monument to Boston's gilded past. Although now converted to luxury condominiums, the developers had preserved the original parlor as a common area for residents. Sarah had convinced the building management to grant them access, claiming historical research purposes. Standing in the same room where the photograph had been taken 112 years ago felt surreal. The windows were the same. Original glass with the characteristic waviness of early 20th century manufacturing. The fireplace mantels, the crown molding, even some of the original wallpaper remained beneath protective coating. The angle would have been from here. Marcus positioned himself where James Morrison must have stood with his camera. The afternoon light slanted through the windows at nearly the same angle as it would have on a December evening. Eleanor from the auction house had brought the original photograph, now protected in an archival sleeve. They compared the current room to the image, noting what had changed and what remained constant. The window that had captured Elizabeth's reflection faced west, overlooking a small private garden. "There's something about this glass," Sarah murmured, running her fingers near, but not touching the antique panes. "Look how it distorts the light differently than modern windows." Dr. Chen had joined them with specialized equipment. He set up sensors to measure light refraction, electromagnetic fields, and even minute temperature variations. If Morrison's phenomenon was real, there might be residual traces. Certain crystalline structures in old glass can retain electromagnetic patterns under specific conditions. While the scientists worked, Sarah noticed something odd. In certain lights, at certain angles, the window seemed to show subtle double reflections, not quite transparent overlays of anyone currently in the room, but fragments of movement that didn't quite match reality. "Did you see that?" she asked Marcus, who was photographing the room with both digital and film cameras. "See what?" He looked up from his viewfinder. Before Sarah could answer, one of Dr. Chen's sensors began registering unusual readings. "There's a localized electromagnetic anomaly right at the window surface. It's incredibly faint, but it's there." The building manager, Mrs. Hartley, had been watching their investigation with interest. "You know," she said suddenly, "other residents have mentioned odd things about that window. Nothing dramatic, just occasional glimpses of people who aren't there. We've always attributed it to tricks of the light." She produced a logbook of maintenance requests. Several entries over the years mentioned the west window. Residents complained of distracting reflections, figures in period dress, and the feeling of being watched. Most interesting was an entry from 1978. Tenant requests window replacement due to persistent visual anomalies. Request denied. Historical preservation requirements. Sarah cross-referenced the dates with her research. Many of the reported anomalies occurred in late December, around the anniversary of the original photograph. That evening, they reconvened at Eleanor's office to discuss their findings. The auction house had decided to postpone the sale of the photograph pending further investigation. The potential historical and scientific significance had attracted attention from multiple institutions. "We need to consider the implications carefully," Eleanor said. "If this photograph represents genuine evidence of an unknown phenomenon, it belongs in a research institution, not a private collection." Marcus had developed his film photographs from the mansion. Most showed nothing unusual, but one image made everyone lean forward. Taken at precisely 4:47 p.m., when the light matched the golden hour of a December evening, it showed a faint secondary reflection in the window, a shadowy figure that wasn't accounted for by anyone present in the room. "It's not as clear as the Morrison photograph," Marcus admitted, "but there's definitely something there." Dr. Chen proposed a radical experiment. On December 24th, we could attempt to recreate the exact conditions. Same time of day, similar atmospheric conditions, even approximate the emotional atmosphere with period music and decoration. If the phenomenon is reproducible, we could document it with modern equipment. The idea both thrilled and unsettled Sarah. Part of her wanted definitive answers, but another part feared that solving the mystery might somehow diminish it. She thought of James Morrison's warning about the price of his discovery. Linda Morrison Hayes contacted them with one more piece of information. She had found Elizabeth's diary in an old trunk. The entries leading up to her death revealed a woman who knew she was dying, but faced it with remarkable grace. The final entry, dated December 19th, 1907, was particularly poignant. "Margaret insists I will attend her Christmas party, and I find I cannot bear to disappoint her. I have promised, and I keep my promises. James has been acting strangely, speaking of preserving moments and capturing light. I humor his experiments, though I fear grief has touched his mind. If love could transcend death, if friendship could bridge the veil, would that not be the greatest Christmas miracle? I choose to believe it possible." Sarah read the passage aloud, and the room fell silent. Whether through science, love, or sheer force of will, Elizabeth Morrison had kept her promise. She had attended one final Christmas party, visible only to the camera's uncaring eye, and perhaps to the heart that refused to let her go. December 24th, 2019, arrived with a light snowfall that dusted Boston's historic streets. The team had spent weeks preparing for this moment. The Ashford Mansion's parlor had been decorated to match the 1907 photograph as closely as possible. Period-appropriate garlands adorned the mantels, and a Christmas tree with electric candles, fire codes prevented real ones, stood in the corner. Sarah adjusted one of the 12 cameras positioned around the room, a mixture of modern digital equipment and vintage film cameras, similar to what James Morrison would have used. Dr. Chen's sensors created an invisible network of monitoring devices, ready to detect the slightest anomaly. "Light conditions are nearly optimal," Dr. Chen announced, checking his tablet. "Barometric pressure and humidity are remarkably similar to historical records from December 1907. Marcus worked with a replica of a 1907 camera, having studied James Morrison's techniques extensively. He had even procured period-accurate glass plates and chemicals for developing. If Morrison's phenomenon requires specific photographic methods, we need to match them exactly. Eleanor had recruited actors from a local historical society to populate the room. Dressed in painstaking period costume, they created tableaux matching the positions of the original party guests. The attention to detail was extraordinary. Even the sheet music on the piano was from 1907. As the afternoon light began to slant through the western windows, Sarah felt the atmosphere in the room shift subtly. The actors, initially chatting and laughing between takes, grew quieter. The shadows seemed deeper, the air heavier with possibility. "Begin the recreation," Eleanor instructed. The actors took their positions. Someone played a period-appropriate waltz on the piano. The cameras clicked and whirred, capturing every angle, every reflection. Sarah found herself holding her breath, watching the window that had captured Elizabeth Morrison's image 112 years ago. At first, nothing happened. The reflections showed only what should be there: the room, the actors, the decorations. Dr. Chen's sensors registered normal readings. Sarah began to feel the creeping disappointment of a mystery that would remain unsolved. Then, at 4:47 p.m., the exact time Marcus had captured his anomaly days earlier, something changed. Electromagnetic spike, Dr. Chen whispered urgently, concentrated at the window. Sarah turned to look directly at the glass. For just a moment, no longer than a heartbeat, she saw her. A woman in a dark dress with a butterfly brooch, standing beside the actress playing Margaret Ashford. The figure was translucent, more suggestion than substance, but unmistakably there. The vintage camera in Marcus's hands clicked. Modern cameras captured nothing unusual. The digital sensors recorded only a brief electromagnetic anomaly. But when Marcus developed his glass plate that evening, using James Morrison's exact chemical formula recreated from his notes, the image was there. Elizabeth Morrison, as clear as she had been in 1907, reflected in the window among the party guests. "How?" Eleanor breathed, staring at the developed plate. Dr. Chen had a theory. The specific silver halide crystals used in 1907, combined with the unique optical properties of the antique glass and precise atmospheric conditions, it creates a sort of temporal lens. Not time travel, not ghosts, but a way of capturing persistent light patterns, echoes of repeated presence. "But why Elizabeth?" Sarah asked. "Why not others who frequented that room?" Linda Morrison Hayes, who had joined them for the experiment, offered an answer that transcended science. Love and intention. Elizabeth promised to attend. James believed she would. Margaret expected her. That concentration of emotion, of will, at the moment of transition between life and death, perhaps it created something unique. The implications were staggering. They had potentially documented a phenomenon that challenged conventional understanding of physics, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself. Yet they had also confirmed that it required such specific conditions, antique materials, precise timing, and perhaps most crucially, the emotional investment of those involved, that it could rarely, if ever, be reproduced. As they packed up the equipment, Sarah noticed something in the modern photographs that everyone else had missed. In one digital image, barely visible in the background, was a faint outline in the window. Not Elizabeth Morrison, but James, a shadowy figure behind an old camera, forever trying to capture his lost love. "He's still there too," she said softly, showing the image to the others. "Still taking her picture, still keeping her promise alive." The team agreed to publish their findings, complete with all the scientific data and historical documentation. The original 1907 photograph would be donated to the Smithsonian, with copies provided to Harvard and MIT for further study. But as Sarah stood one last time in that parlor, watching the snow fall outside the antique windows, she realized that some mysteries weren't meant to be fully solved. They had proven that something extraordinary had happened at that Christmas party in 1907. Whether it was love transcending death, quantum physics bending reality, or simply the power of human will imposing itself on the physical world, the truth remained beautifully ambiguous. Elizabeth Morrison had kept her promise. She had attended one final Christmas party with her dear friend. That James Morrison had found a way to capture that moment through science, art, or magic was perhaps the real Christmas miracle. As Sarah left the mansion, she looked back at the window one more time. Her own reflection stared back, but for just a moment she could swear she saw two other figures, a woman with a butterfly brooch and a man with an old camera, forever frozen in a moment of impossible reunion. Some stories, she realized, didn't need complete explanations. Sometimes the mystery itself was the answer, a reminder that love, loss, and the bonds between human souls could create realities that science was only beginning to understand. The snow continued to fall on Boston, just as it had on that long-ago Christmas Eve, when a photographer's grief and a dying woman's promise created something that shouldn't have existed, yet undeniably did. In windows throughout the city, reflections danced and shifted, carrying their own secrets, their own stories of presence and absence, of love that refused to acknowledge the boundaries between life and death. Well, there you have it, the incredible story of the 1907 Christmas photograph. What do you think really happened that night? Was it an unknown quantum phenomenon, the power of love and grief bending reality, or something else entirely? I'd love to hear your theories in the comments below. If this story gave you chills or made you think, please don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts. Did Elizabeth Morrison really appear at that party? Or did James Morrison discover something about the nature of reality that we're only beginning to understand? Your perspectives always fascinate me. And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. I have so many more mysterious photographs and untold stories from history to share with you. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Until next time, keep questioning the impossible, and remember, sometimes the most extraordinary truths hide in the shadows of old photographs. Thank you for watching.